Hey guys, on today's episode, I am bouncing off the walls. We have the Glickenhaus 004. Now this particular model has three different versions, the S, the CS, and the C, which is the competition or the race car. This one is the S, it's analog, it's got a stick shift. Absolutely unbelievable. I actually drove here with Jesse from his studio to my studio here, and the car is unbelievable. So what makes this extra special is this is unfinished. This is the prototype version. And what's gonna happen is in the next couple of days, it's actually gonna be driven into a wall. So a lot of you are thinking, well, why the heck is it here? Well, what we're doing is we're practicing on the vehicle. Why? Because we have 25 versions of this in the different models coming out within this year. And we have to practice and make sure that every car is absolutely perfect. So essentially what I'm saying is this by far in my entire career is the most expensive test panel I've ever had on any single car ever. So that and a whole lot more on this episode of Drive and Protect. So this is yet another brainchild of Jim Glickenhaus of Scuderia Cameron Glickenhaus. He's built a variety of cars, including the Coach-built 2006 Ferrari P45 Pininfarina, the SCG-07, the SCG-03, the Baja Boot, which was featured in a previous episode, by the way, and the SCG-004S, now in the Ammo Studio. He's been hot rodding cars since the age of 16, and his P45 will be in the studio later this year for a detail, so make sure to be subscribed to find out when. What makes this project extra special or unique for me personally is I've never been so close to the manufacturing process in that I'm working directly with Jesse and the team to create options for their customers based on the pre-impregnated carbon fiber components. So for instance, does the customer want it painted, or do they want it left raw exposed carbon fiber, or exposed but polished carbon fiber, or clear bra that's shiny, or clear bra that's matte, and so on. So each customer can check the respective box before the build, and the vehicle will arrive at the Ammo Studio to complete the desired look and feel before being unveiled to the new owner. Again, in 20 plus years of detailing hypercars, actually being a factory option is one of the greatest responsibilities and honors I've had in my career. So to say the very least, every vehicle will be precisely what the customer orders and will be finished with 2 layers of Ammo Reflex Pro, regardless of what option they choose. Just as an FYI, Danbury, Connecticut has become the mecca for cars in the last few years. Speed sport tuning and all things Porsche, BMW, Audi, and racing. Of course, you've seen them over the years. Glickenhaus SCG engineering and manufacturing facility where these cars are hand-built. And across the street, the all-new 51,000 square foot North American motor car mega building for car storage, restoration, custom motorcycles, vintage, and muscle car sales. Literally everything you can dream of in one town. It's pretty awesome. Okay, so let's back up a little bit before the 004 arrived at the studio to get a quick tour of what makes this car so special and how Jesse is preparing the 004 for the crash test in the next few days.
We're here in Danbury, not too far from you. We're building the 004S crash test car. A lot of things on this car are prototype because we're going to drive it into a wall. This is something we do on all the race cars where we torque to spec and then we mark it with a paint pen. And what this enables you to do, if there's a touch on the track, if cars get bumped or after the crash test, you can visually inspect this, and if the paint has cracked, you know you have to unbolt and check the structure underneath. If the paint is fine, it means most likely the energy was absorbed outside and the structure underneath is okay. So after we torque to spec, everything is marked.
To watch the full interview, click the link above or head over to my behind the scenes channel called The Ammo Studio. Once assembled a day or so later, we were called back to the Glickenhaus facility, which was about 5 minutes down the road, to watch the final test drives in the parking lot before buckling up in the 3-seater for a short drive back to the Ammo Studio. not too hard. Once you're inside, the visibility is incredible. Actually, I take that back. That's not really a fair word to describe it. You feel like you're flying in an airplane but on the ground because of the bubble or the dome cockpit. Now, you take all of that and you combine it with being in the center of the car. The sensation, although foreign, because you don't really drive cars in the middle of the car, it's perfect. I'm not exactly sure why more supercars don't have this, of course, besides McLaren F1 and the Ferrari 365P and a few other amazing three-seaters. But my point is, it's just perfect in every single way from the driving perspective. I would imagine that more cars would be like this.
So the very first time my dad and I drove an 04S, the very first time an 04S had ever been driven, the car had less than 10 miles on it. We're at the 24 Hours of Nürburgring. We took it out. It's pissing rain. I'm in the passenger seat where you are. My dad's driving. I'm like, Dad, there's no ABS, there's no traction control. The car doesn't even have 10 miles on it. Take it easy. He's like, yeah. Halfway through the lap, he's hitting the curves. He drops into the concrete on the carousel, and he's like giving thumbs up and smiling and waving to all of the marshals in the pissing rain. I'm like that. Like this car hasn't gone 16 miles total. One lap around the Nürburgring, 16 miles. He's like, no.
Now, at about this time, the traffic is basically crawling.
This M3 wants to race. What's up?
I like those wheels. I like those rims.
Not just from the 004 causing a scene, but now because of a motorcycle accident ahead. And the 5-minute trip has now taken almost 40 minutes. It's not that big of a deal, but we didn't plan for carrying enough fuel to be sitting in stop and go traffic for 40 minutes. So as we got off my exit, the 3 gallons of fuel was out.
We should put more gas in it because we only put in 3 gallons and we've got more. And how far are we driving? And we had that conversation, and I guess like,
So we got the car started. We did all that extra work. We got all the way here, and we ran out of gas.
So we pushed the car to the park and ride about 100 yards away. Anyone who has ever been involved in supercars or racing or engineering knows that this stuff is not odd. It's just part of the journey, what makes for a great memory.
Round number 2.
Once in the studio, you can see this particular prototype consists of many different panels. The reason why is it's going to be crashed in less than 7 days, so SCG is testing all the various materials on this car at one time. The area where you can't visibly see the weave is for customers who want a specific color. In other words, paint is going to be applied over those areas. Now, the other panels, like the rear quarter panel right here, are exposed pre-impregnated carbon fiber, which is a different process than, let's say, the standard resin applied to the carbon fiber by hand. Pre-impregnated, also referred to as pre-preg carbon fiber, is the process where carbon fiber is pre-impregnated with partially cured resin and the hardener already in it, as opposed to hand spreading the resin in a traditional fashion. The pre-preg needs to be stored in a freezer or it will cure at room temperature, as heat accelerates complete polymerization. The reason why pre-preg is used here is this process ensures the most accurate resin to weave ratio for the perfect blend of weight to strength per square inch, commonly used in aviation and, of course, motorsport applications. Now, the first step in cleaning the car is to remove a bit of grime from the various burnouts in the Glickenhaus parking lot with Ammo Frothy and the Pro Foamer. Clearly, using water on a prototype is not a good idea for obvious reasons. In the tight spots, I used compressed air to blow out the many rocks that may be lodged into various different panels underneath, and then I repeated the same steps on the rest of the car and the engine compartment. For my polishing test, I first opened the engine bonnet and taped various edges before testing a few different methods. Now, I started with the rotary and compound just to see how the pre-preg would react, and it looked much better, but I wanted to explore a few different ways to sort of minimize the multi-step process. So for test number 1, here's what I did. The right side was done with a rotary polisher, a yellow wool pad, and fine polish. The middle was done with a rotary, blue wool pad, and coarse compound. Then I compared them to each other, and then I compared those to the unfinished carbon fiber as well. Now, for sort of the third test on this specific panel, the left side, I used a rotary polisher, blue wool pad, coarse compound, but then I finished up with the DA polisher, meaning with the yellow pad and polish, to study the difference in the surface reflection of all three of them. So the results for test number 1 were good, but not exactly perfect. What you can see on close inspection is that the sanding that was done at the factory is very heavy. In other words, it's very coarse sanding, not typically found on paint jobs. However, this isn't a paint job, so it kind of makes sense. So super heavy sanding would be required first before using the heavy wool pad, thus adding more steps to this unorthodox process. So my next attempt was on the driver's side door. I wanted to see if I did 2 steps of rotary, I could avoid the 1 step of heavy sanding. Now, this was a small chance, but it's worth taking a shot on a test panel about to be crashed. Again, I have 0 consequences other than learning. Once again, when I was done, it looked much better, but it still wasn't where it needed to be. Plus, I introduced a lot of heat to that surface, which is not ideal. So after all this testing, I figured out that the problem is the wool pad can't reach deep enough to remove the super heavy grit or roughness given from the manufacturing process. So my next test was to hit it with a palm sander and sandpaper. But what grit to use? Now that is the question. After a few more tests, the moral of the story is, once again, residue control. But in this case, it's actually resin instead of clear coat that you need to flush out with water when you're working. So it's what we call lots of supplemental wetting agents should be used. In other words, that's a overcomplicated way of saying spray it with water while you're polishing or sanding. By introducing a bit of water, it will actually flush or move out the resin so that it doesn't fill up the pad, thus scouring the paint, or in this case, the carbon fiber. So here's a good example on the rear fender of what we would have to do if the customer wants super shiny exposed pre-preg carbon fiber. First, sand with 320 or 500 grit, depending on it being in a seam or not, with a good amount of water. Then hit it with 1000 grit in a palm sander. This particular paper is to be used without water, or what we call dry sanding. Next was 1500 wet in a palm sander. Once squeegeed, you can begin to see a bit of the reflection starting to come back. Then 2000 grit damp on a palm sander to refine the 1500 that was done previously. After that, I used a microfiber cutting pad, blue coarse compound, and a few squirts of water to help carry the residue away. Once done, I wiped away the compound and completed the final step with a yellow pad and polish for the final gloss and depth I was really looking for. Granted, this is an insane amount of work, but the results are incredibly unique as the carbon fiber now looks almost 3-dimensional. All right, guys, well, we're done with the test day, and it's been awesome to be involved in this. So we've thrown everything we possibly could at this just to see how it's going to react. Again, it is a test car, and it's going to be driven to a wall very soon. So what we did was gather all the data from detailing it, everything from using 320 grit, yeah, I said 320 grit, and all the way up to polishing to see how it would react. We gather that data, we hand it off to the Glickenhaus team, and then they can decide what they're going to offer their clients. Everything from raw carbon fiber to clear bra to this right here, which is almost ready to go, Pebble Beach, show car, etc., and everything in between. So, like I said, the only thing that's left to do, sadly enough, is to get this thing on a trailer, bring it up to Canada, and drive it into a wall. The next morning, the Canadian trailer arrived for pickup, and Jesse and Paul worked with the driver to carefully move the vehicle into the truck, along with all the necessary paperwork to enter the country. With that, he and the prototype were on its way to the crash facility. Now, if you're as unfamiliar as I was, getting a vehicle legally approved for road use from the various departments of transportation, highway safety, motor vehicle, and so on requires the vehicle to pass a ton of safety tests for very obvious reasons. Now, however, the irony is the government doesn't do the certification testing. The manufacturer of the respective vehicles are responsible for doing it themselves. So it's incumbent on the manufacturer to self-regulate, analyze the data, and grade themselves with a pass or fail before letting them hit the market. SCG first uses computer simulation to create a crash test to tighten up the specs and to see where components can be adjusted prior to hiring a third-party lab to actually do the independent crash test. One of many of those tests is a 30-mile-an-hour head-on collision with a wall. The vehicle is towed by power electric motors that tow the vehicle to impact speeds over 500 feet before crashing it into a barrier. As you can see, the vehicle is filled with data collecting instruments, which can take up to about 2 days to prepare. Then the data is collected objectively, approved or rejected to meet the federal standards and to improve the existing design and safety of the vehicle based on this outside party's data. In fact, the 004C race car, which crashed on ice and snow on the same day that I'm doing this voiceover right now at 70 kilometers per hour, and the car and the driver were completely safe. Now, obviously, the car needs to be repaired, and it's going to be back on the track testing for the 6 hours of qualifying for the 24-hour at Nürburgring. Again, this is a legit race car made for the street, and they stand behind it.
She's all back together, ready to go. Calmness is in. We're going to fire her up. She has on her new wing, and she's completely repaired.
After the Canadian test crash, I met up with Jesse to get a tour of the car when it arrived back in Danbury for disassembly.
We passed the crash test we needed to pass. Here's the chassis. We're going to inspect that. Already inspected it, did an engineering report on it, lessons learned. What can we improve? We're always trying to improve things. And now, we got a nose here. This is, when you crash into a wall at 30 miles an hour, it does a little bit of damage. Broke that off. We removed the headlights, they didn't come out. The mirrors stayed on. This looks pretty nice though. This is actually probably repairable if you want, or we put that on the wall, give it away to some fans. You can see the rest of the parts. This Tuesday morning was all put together as a car. Now it's all apart. We look at it. I see some very nice polished rear quarter panels there. It hurts a little bit emotionally to take this work of art and crash it into a wall. But you know, you show you meet the standards, you check your engineering, and you learn some things, and ready for the next one.
For more information on all the Glickenhaus cars, visit hkmotorcars.com. And once all the customer cars are built, we'll have a video for each of them as they receive their ammo preservation. As always, thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more how-to car care episodes.